on behalf of Hawaiian IANDS and Denver Near Death Experience Spirituality Group, we want to welcome everybody, and a special welcome to our friend Rex as he celebrates the Kindle release of his book, My Experiment with Gravity, which is available on Amazon. And as a special gift to you all, Rex is going to give away the PDF version of the Kindle release, which is the same thing. You can actually send the PDF to your Kindle and it reads just like a Kindle. And so it's his gift to you. And if you feel inspired, he would love it if you could put some reviews on his book page for it and tell the world what you think about Rex's story and how he might have inspired you. So that would be awesome. And Katie, maybe you can put the link in the chat so everybody can download that. And then just please just use it for your own use. Don't share it with the world. Rex would like to make $1 or so off this book at some point. So we don't want to give it away. It's just for the people here tonight. So for those of you who don't know, Rex experienced an NDE in 2011 when he fell 26 feet from a cottonwood tree and landed headfirst on the concrete. He spent a month in the hospital and 5 days in a coma with bleeding on the brain in 3 places and a traumatic brain injury. He also had broken bones and a badly punctured lung with massive internal bleeding. The healing process took nearly 2 years, including surgeries and therapy. While he was in a comatose state and crashing, he had the experience of an NDE. He had a divine vision experiencing a golden white light. He realized he was the light. It was the source of not only his own pure being, but pure being itself, with a profound and permeating sense of pure love, life, and mind. He experienced the all of space, time, multiple realities, and parallel universes, and infinite dimensions all at once. He says, I experienced my own here being. I was still me, but I was also pure being itself. For a moment, I was the all of everything. I was pure love, life, and the mind and imagination that gives rise to all of creation. Since his NDE, Rex now sees and thinks in ways he never thought possible, especially regarding consciousness, divinity, the unified field, and a perspective of multi-universal reality. Rex is living his life that he never thought possible. In addition to being a writer and presenter and martial artist, Rex is a composer and musician, performing in a band and working on his own original music. And again, please check out the free PDF that he offered. And if you could give a review on his Amazon page, that would be great. With that, turn it over to you, Rex.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shaun. And thank you, Katie, and everybody. Tonight, we're going to do something kind of special. I hope it's a special experience all the way around. And hopefully I don't say the word special too much, but I want to start off with a meditation that basically is my near-death experience. I've discovered one of the best ways that I can share my near-death experience. And of course, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to share the story. I'm going to get into all those moments while near-death. But what we're going to do right now is you're going to experience that moment with me. We're going to take a journey to the soul, getting past the layers of consciousness, the layers of our experiential reality, and just trying to touch that part of us that is just our pure being, our pure love. So Katie, if you have the video ready, I would be most grateful if we can get that going. Wonderful. Now, this is going to be a different kind of meditation. And of course, find a place to get comfortable, be relaxed. Close your eyes if you like sitting up, just where you can feel like you're in a comfortable and a centered kind of a space where you can just go, feel safe, vulnerable, and just let yourself be open. It's going to be a journey of mind, journey of the soul, journey of imagination, a journey of your dreams. I love to quote Poe when he said, "All that we see or seen is but a dream within a dream." So imagine, take a nice deep breath, and imagine falling backwards, falling through the layers of the experience, falling through the layers of dreams, getting into the unconscious thoughts, getting into those layers where there's less division and more oneness. Falling back into pure self. And imagine you are all space. Whatever the expanse of the universe might really be. And you are all time, past, present, and future, all at once. Imagine every possibility, every probability, concepts of multiple realities and parallel universes, all within you, every thought, every secret, the idea is already there within you. Imagine infinite dimensions, no limits. Here, you're not feeling love. You are love. Here, you are not alive. You are the source of life itself. Here, you are not a collection of thoughts. You are the thought, the mind, the imagination that gives rise to creation itself. Each of us, an infinite universe unto ourselves. Co-creating together, a single conscious being. Deep into your soul, this is what we truly are. Pure essence of being. Love, life, and mind. Here, anything is possible. If you can imagine it, you can be it. If you can imagine it, you can do it. Believe. You are the power. I am the power. Together, we are the ultimate power. Take a moment with that. As we begin our journey back to call it default reality, brick and mortar reality. Journey back to the experience. Bring the source with you. Bring this imagination, these ideas, thoughts, dreams, even from places in your being that you forgot even existed. Bring that back with you. All that love, that life, that mind, bring that back with you. Always remember, you are the power. I am the power. We are the power, powerful force of the universe. We are love. Open your heart. You're ready. Slowly re-emerge. And thank you, everyone.
That was beautiful.
Thank you, Shaun. I appreciate that. And the beautiful thing too is maybe one day, if we want to do that again, that can go on as long as we want it to. We can journey. I mean, I've done that meditation for as long as an hour before. So yes, and thank you. I'm glad I got to share that with you. Hopefully it'll be the perfect setup for what we're about to dive into. All right, so I guess I need to hit share screen. Oh, I think I'm already on. I assume everybody can see that. Let's see here. There we go. How appropriate as we journey through the depths of our dreams, the depths of our soul, the depths of our love. If there's any one quote I could ever use to sum up my near-death experience, it really is this one right here. I've said it many times and I'll say it many times again. And I just love Poe. I think he's just a wonderful author. So many intriguing and thought-provoking stories when you get into the underlying of it, but I'll save that for another time. But I'll say it again though, all that we see or seeing is but a dream within a dream. So I'm looking forward to sharing and diving into and expanding on what you just experienced, getting into how my life transitioned from the person that I was prior to the near-death experience and the person that I've been still becoming. I mean, I'm 11 years post, and the transition is still very much underway. The transformation, the manifestation, it's still very much happening. Even the healing process, I think I'm still very much in that healing process right now as we speak, because things are always changing, and I kind of feel like it is changing for the better. I get stronger even as I'm getting older. I'm 55 years old. I've noticed that my energy level, instead of going backward, is actually coming up, because one of the things that came with this traumatic brain injury is I ended up with the energy of somebody twice my age. Now I nap. I have a lot of issues that I have that come with it, migraines and other things. But this is the auspicious tree. This is the cottonwood that I fell out of. This was a picture that was taken just shortly after, I think it was probably my fourth surgery, when I was finally getting my full mobility of my full body back. And as we dive into the depths of this, the near-death experience moment, there's a lot of folks here that haven't heard what led to this. What was my near-death experience? You heard a 26-foot fall, but one of the funny things about doing these presentations, as soon as people hear about me falling out of a tree, the first question before what happened while near death is, what in the world was a grown man doing up in a tree? So, all right, let me answer that one first. I'm a longtime martial artist. I'm a martial arts instructor, and I still like to teach and practice. Of course, I don't do any of the fighting stuff anymore. I retired from that long ago. But as a martial artist, I like to cross-train in different areas. I like climbing and I like yoga, and I still do. I recommend both highly. And of course, climb very safely and climb in a controlled environment maybe would be the better option. But case in point is it was a training day, and I trained with a wonderful old master by the name of Willem de Tours, who's out of Java, Indonesia. He's about to turn 86, one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met in my whole life. But anyways, we used to do these early Sunday morning sessions. And because I'm a night owl, and back then I was a nightclub and concert promoter, I was a DJ, and my life was pretty much at night. So we would I'd go to these classes on Sunday mornings, which started at 7 a.m. And I would oftentimes go with no sleep because some of my events wouldn't end until 5 a.m. the night before, like literally a couple hours before the class there. So a lot of times I would show up at class and have no sleep, just pound an energy drink and get through whether those really brutal classes sometimes. And then I'd go home and crash. For some reason on this particular day, I was feeling amazing. I was so much energy. I was just so vibrant, full of life. I got home, and instead of going home, going in and going to sleep, I normally would. I went out for a jog. There was a park nearby where I was living, and so I went out for a run, about a 3-mile run. And on my way back, I went by my favorite cottonwood tree. You see in the picture right here, and I climbed this tree hundreds of times. And at the time, I guess I didn't really understand how weak the trees really were. I mean, I've heard stories, but this was a live, thick cottonwood. And the branches that broke underneath me were not dead branches. They were both live branches, which all of them were intriguing. But because it's, Denver doesn't really have, you don't have mountains in Denver. Denver, is just a little bit east of the Front Range. So you got to drive a little bit, not too far, but I got to drive a little bit to get into the mountains to go climbing if I want to. So when I'm in town, I like to climb trees. I don't climb anymore. I made a few promises to some folks that I wouldn't climb anymore. But needless to say, I just saw my favorite tree. I'd climbed it like 100 times and just decided to go for a climb. And I was careful. I'm not somebody who was trying to race through the tree. And anytime I climbed, especially when I was on the side of a cliff or on a mountainside or something, I was very slow, very meticulous. And so same thing. I wasn't rushing through anything. And as I'm literally on my way back, ready to come back down out of the tree, one of the branches broke underneath me. And I slipped. And I remember this. I actually remember the oh snap moment. It took a while, but I do remember all of this now. And I reached out to grab a second branch, and it also broke and kind of swung me around. And this is where it all gets nebulous for me, but it's all in my records. So everything I'm telling you here is either, if I don't remember it, it's in print in one of either my medical records, police report, first responder report. But it said in my records that I fell 26 feet and I hit a concrete bike path head first. No joke. I have a number of people in the medical community, a number of people that are in my life that are referring to me to this day as a walking miracle. And many have suggested that there's no good reason, medically speaking, that I should be alive. That apparently when I crashed, I crashed a bunch of times those first few days that I was in the hospital. And according to a couple of my doctors, they literally were ready to call it. Apparently, whoever the head of the trauma team, whatever, they were ready to say, okay, we're done. We've done everything we can do. And somehow I would just keep coming back. I've got one doctor, my orthopedic surgeon, who apparently was working on me when one of my crashes happened. And he described it to me like it was just a miracle that I came back. He's like, there's just no way. I've never seen anybody come back from that before. You were gone, and there was somehow we were ready to call it. Literally, it was right at that precipice, and you somehow came back. So there was a very scary touch and go kind of a situation. And I, like Shaun said in the intro, I had massive bleeding on the brain. It was explained to me after a couple of months that I had so much bleeding on the brain that when I was in the coma, it was thought, when they realized I was going to survive, that the thought at the time was that I was probably going to end up a vegetable or severely handicapped. Thankfully, I definitely have issues. My brain is very, very different from what it was before, but I'm still me. I have most of my memories intact, and I still feel like I'm myself, in basically being given a second chance at life, which is really what this is absolutely all about. So yes, somewhere in the midst of all of that, something crazy happened, and literally everything I just described to you in that meditation, I literally, for a moment, and sometimes people ask me, well, Rex, how long was it? You crashed a bunch of different times. Did you have different experiences? It's like, as far as I can tell, all I had was just a moment. For all I know, if you want to try to put it in chronological terms, maybe that moment lasted the entire 5 days I was out. But in terms of the memory, the recollection of that moment, it was almost like just a split second in a way. But in that split second was all of eternity. It was everything, the all of everything in that split second was the essence of love, was the essence of life, the essence of mind. It really was, for a moment, I was potential reality. I literally was all space and time. I literally was experiencing and existing in a space of all those realities happening all at once. And literally all these dimensions interacting and synergizing and just being all at once. And sometimes people ask me, well, did you, have a sense of like yourself and your body? Did you, have an out of body? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to really answer that, because I still had a sense of me. I was very much like I say, I was myself. And even in that near-death state, I had no concept of my physical body. And interestingly, I didn't really think about the physical world when I was there. I did just, for the moment, I just was in this space of being. And it felt like the most real, most natural space I could even begin to imagine. That moment, if you will, was actually more real to me than even this moment right now that I'm sharing with all of you. And this is we're in a tangible, experiential, point of our reality here. Did I experience angels? Did I experience other beings? In a manner of speaking, yes. Because like I said, I experienced all things all at once, literally from the darkest of the dark to the lightest of the light and everything in between. I feel like when I describe this sort of sense of golden white light, and it was so pure and pristine, and the whiteness of the light was also the most clear, pristine white you can imagine, but yet it has some sort of, all I can say is like a golden hue to it. And I say it in a sense of trying to visualize it with our eyes, but I wasn't experiencing it like that. I'm trying to describe it in this way, but the experience was much more esoteric and more abstract than that. So sometimes when I talk about this part of the being, I describe dark and light as being different sides of the same coin. In the experience, we need to make our choices about which sides of that coin that we want to live and exist and experience on. And oftentimes for most of us, it's going to be a little bit of both. I think most people in this world have we have that inclination to be both dark and light, and it's within us. And that's one of the parts of our free will, is to get to choose what do we draw on inside of that being, especially based on, say, life experience or even past life experience, if you want to get into it and go down that rabbit hole. But so instead of necessarily having individual, say, angelic or experiences with beings, it opened up the door to where my life now is an experience of having those interactions and those relationships and friendships, if you will, because it's like I kind of did it backwards, I suppose, where it was all part of that. Were they all there? Of course, it was the all of everything. So yes, the angels were all there, but then one could argue, well, devils and demons were there too. It was all part of all of the everything. And I've learned that all of us, and this is just my perception here from the NDE, that all that exists is born of light. And all that exists that is born of light will eventually return to light. But getting into the karmic concepts, which we're not going to dive into too much tonight, but getting into some of those karmic concepts, some of those relationships, you kind of get a sense of where it began in that first dynamic of the proverbial, if I, maybe you use a biblical metaphor for a moment, the casting of the 1/3 of the angels out of heaven, if you will. It's almost the representation of that first duality being born of the dark and the light. And from that became all these experiences that started to merge together. And the short of it is, eventually we come into that picture somewhere in that gray area. And that's something that came out of this NDE that I keep envisioning. And then with it, and because of that, beings, I have relationships with, say, Jesus Christ, with Krishna, with Lao Tzu, Kuan Yin, all these, I guess you could say, some people call them archetypes, I guess. I just call them spiritual beings. I have a relationship with many angels that has come from this, and literally to the point of calling them friendships. A lot of different spiritual guides, if you will, even beings that have lived on Earth's past, visit with me and share with me. Some of the music that I make literally is a sharing of energies with some of these spiritual beings. And even artists like, for example, Prince, when shortly after he died, some reason, I mean, I've always loved Prince just as a fan, but I never had an interaction with him. Chances of us ever meeting in this lifetime had he not died when he did are probably slim to none. But for some reason, since he died, I have this regular visitation from him. And I do have a piece of music I wrote. It's called A Shade of Purple, as a result of the fusing of these energies. And this music is what came out of it. I also have a wonderful angel story that I'd love to get into maybe sometime, where I think I got into one of the share groups with a month or so ago, where I have music that came out of an experience with an angel who was on the verge of falling. I was having my own form of existential crisis a couple of years ago, like many of us did, especially once the shutdowns happened with COVID and everything. And I had this incredible experience with this really beautiful, powerful angel I'd never felt before. And she was having her own form of existential crisis, if you will. And we came together, and it's interesting how I've never been a musician before. I've been a DJ most of my life, but I had not really started becoming a musician till the last few years. So some of the music that is coming through me, I can only think is really just is universal flow in one form or another. So much like I described when Prince has come to me, our angels fuse together. The first piece of music is very dark and painful. The second piece of music is basically both of us feeling the sense of liberation, the rebirth and renewal of coming through this crisis we were both experiencing together, and coming out on the other end and having a clear vision of what we both needed to do. And this is one of the things I like to talk about, because, and you have to get off topic too much here, but it shows me that these guides, these beings, while we may view them as being, on such an exponentially higher level than all of us, if you will, but they too need us like we need them. They too are on their own experience, and perhaps they even have their own forms of karma that they're also working through. And make no mistake, it's as much as a friendship to them as it does to us. And I realize, okay, that's such a powerful moment to think that, because I'm just a little old human being here, how could I help an angel? But yet, while this angel saved me, seriously, because I was really in that space. It's been a really tough time since my NDE, and I'm in this incredibly sensitive space now, and everything affects me so much. And I was just so overwhelmed that I just didn't know what to do with it all, and I just wasn't seeing a way through it. And this angel helped me to see that, and I somehow helped her to see that too. So my point being is that these relationships are important in both directions. Instead of looking at these guides and these angels as, just being teachers, yes, they still are, and I'm still learning so much from them. But at the same time, I've learned that they're learning from all of us too. And in that moment, for whatever reason, this lowly little human, this, as small as we perceive ourselves sometimes, was sort of like that story, I guess, of the mouse that took the thorn out of the lion's paw. And of course, the lion, because everything, how the story goes, but the lion was roaring and all the animals were afraid. And this little mouse realized, oh, the lion's roaring because it's got a thorn in its paw and it's in pain. So it just this little tiny mouse pulls the thorn out and basically just saves the lion, in a manner of speaking. So it's kind of like that. And if you want to kind of create an analogy, but my point is that, I mean, sometimes even our fuzzy four-legged family members, our dogs and cats, and if you have horses or what have you, that love is just as deep and as powerful, and we need them every bit as much as they need us, if that makes sense. Because sometimes we think of our pets as being somehow, maybe even as much as we love them, maybe they're somehow lower than us because we don't have the same intelligence, perhaps. But yet, I'm sure everybody in this group would probably agree, if you have pets or you know people with pets, you probably learned as much from them as you do from your human friends and your human family. So yes, that near-death experience coming back, did I experience beings and angels? Maybe not specifically in the NDE itself, but ever since then, it's become a very normal part of my experience. Is a normal part of my experience is having these interactions with all of you right now. So as we've been talking about, is that moment while near death, is the experience of my own pure being, but as pure being itself. And my interpretation of that is that this is what the soul really is. So as a result, I feel like there's really but one soul, the soul of the divine, soul of God, goddess, the soul of the ultimate observer, whichever terminology you like to use for that. I like goddess personally. Mother, giver, creator. This is what goddess, female energy, represents to me. But it was the essence of pure being, meaning that this is the source of all of us. And something that Katie and I have talked about many times, and I've talked about in other presentations, and I think Shaun and I touched upon this today when we were talking. There are, I mean, of course, there's a lot of ways to access this information. There's a lot of ways, meaning you don't have to have a near-death experience. I'm one of these people because of the kind of the life that I led before. I was a hard person. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was a nice guy. But in my life before, as a martial artist, I used to fight a lot. When I was a young guy, I did a lot of fighting on the streets. I do have a history of drug addiction. And I also have things on my soul journey, even in this human life, that I'm really, really not proud of. And I'd be almost embarrassed to even share with anybody, because it's literally like that. And even getting up to the point of the NDE, the person that I was a much better person, much healthier person, but I was still carrying the weight of all of the stuff from my past with me. I also carry this undercurrent of anger that, you know, people that knew me back then versus people that still know me today, that are still part of my life, will tell me, it's like, wow, Rex, you know, one of the biggest differences is that I notice about you is, I mean, yeah, before the NDE, you come through a lot, and you were a nice guy, you're a good dude and all that. But you always had this undercurrent of darkness. I mean, and apparently I didn't necessarily know this, but everybody sort of looked at me as like somebody you just didn't want to piss off. And sometimes I guess people walked on eggshells around me as a result, because is I hate to admit, but I was very much capable of being quite the a-hole, if you will. I could be a real freaking jerk at times. And there's a lot of that I'm not proud of. I hung on to that, you know, going into the near-death experience. I was reaching a place in my life. Interestingly, I just received an offer for my dream job. I'd been waiting for this particular kind of opportunity for years. Finally received the dream job offer. Of course, days later is when I fell out of the tree. But I just could not let go of this stuff. I just carried all of this heaviness with me. And I had the mentality, like I think some of us sometimes have, that I'm just not deserving. The kind of person that I am, especially as I was struggling to become more conscious, the more I had to observe my actions of the past and take in the ramifications of those actions. And that became more and more painful as I continued to grow more conscious. And I didn't know how to let go of all of that. And one of the biggest, most important things about this experience and touching the source of pure love is that I learned to forgive. So not only did I learn to forgive from my past, but I also learned to forgive myself. And that has been perhaps the single most liberating thing about the near-death experience, in terms of allowing me to continue with this transformation that has begun because of this near-death experience. And I took it very much as an opportunity to reinvent myself. And we talked about source of pure being, love, spirit, mind, the idea that it's all consciousness. But the opportunity to reinvent myself, I couldn't pass on. And sometimes people think, well, you had a near-death experience, so you kind of had something sort of given to you. And I did. There's no question. I was given a tremendous gift. On the one hand, don't get me wrong, the medical stuff is brutal. I would not wish that upon anybody. And if I had known I had to go through all of that to get this, I probably wouldn't have done it. Now that I'm on the other side of it, of course, I'm grateful for it more than I could possibly express, because it has taught me about forgiveness, and it's taught me what it means to truly love, to truly connect, and also to how to put this into practice. And, you know, one of the things I want to maybe engage a little bit is, you know, with respect to all of your lives and whatever you're going through, whatever you're struggling with, answers you're struggling to find, helping to find that space from within to help you find those answers. You know, if I don't have it maybe intrinsically here in terms of something I might say, perhaps something from this conversation, something from this presentation will spark or jog something loose, or perhaps give you an idea of something you hadn't thought about before. So that's all this is really about, is teaching, giving a sense of self-empowerment. And in the process, I'm grateful to get to share my story, because it helps me to learn and helps me to grow. And of course, insights and ideas that I receive from everybody when I do these also helps me to learn and grow as well, because I'm still figuring this out.
Say, Rex, we have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question. What was your understanding of God's source creator before your NDE?
I would say my understanding of God's source creator was probably much more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like a lot of people's, I suppose. I saw a much more separatist view of it. I thought of God as being, first of all, male. To me, I see the divine feminine in the source now. But I was seeing not so much the Christian perspective of it, because I was really never a religious person. But yeah, I would say I just saw much more of a separate God. And in fact, I wasn't even sure that I totally believed in God at that point. It was more like I was one of those folks that was, I wouldn't say agnostic, but I definitely believed there was something more going on here, but I wasn't sure I was willing to embrace the concept of a God. But I could not wrap my mind around the concept of all of us being essentially ourselves, God, that we are a part of this being, as this being is a part of all of us. So the biggest, perhaps the biggest change is that I see the oneness in it now, which I did not see the oneness in it before. I guess I had a much more rudimentary, archaic vision of what God is prior to the NDE. Like I say, I just saw this maybe this male divine figure that somehow just sparked creation and all of this and created this really seemingly messed up world that we all live in, and giving many of us what I thought was, for me, a very messed up life. Now, of course, I've learned to take responsibility for all of that and take ownership of all of that, and understanding and seeing it the way that I do. And it's helped me to also help shift and maneuver this energy into something that is different than what it was before, something that's more reflective of the person that I'm becoming. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Person also asked another question about how your life was before your NDE. Like, were you happy, satisfied with how things were going?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing that's really interesting about what right before the NDE is that, as I mentioned, I just received the offer for my dream job. Like I mentioned, I'm a nightclub and concert promoter. At least I was then. I'm not now. I can't. My brain doesn't work like that. I could never do that kind of work now. But at the time, that was my dream position, is to get. I was a management position in a nightclub, and I did. It was a beautiful club, had a big stage, lights, everything I needed, because I did a lot of performance-oriented shows. My shows were not just dancers and DJs and bands. My shows involved burlesque and go-go and all kinds of other types of fire performance and things like that. I mean, I had some really elaborate shows back in those years. So I was just looking for for years, been looking for that venue and that place where I could just land, because as a promoter, I was going to different venues all the time. I had like 5 or 6 venues, depending on the show, the artist, the size of the show that I was using. So this was finally an opportunity to have a home base, also get paid a salary plus my bonuses. And I was going to get paid really, really well, and have a venue that had everything I wanted to do, the kind of shows that I regularly like to do. And so with that, this is where it gets interesting. I mentioned also that I carried this undercurrent of anger. I mean, all of my drug addiction years, the years where I was fighting on the streets, and the years where I was very much had some very violent times, let's just say, that all happened pretty much in my early 20s up into probably like my early 30s kind of type of thing. So by the time I got to the NDE, I was 44. I had grown a lot by then. I'd also become a much more peaceful person by then. But I was struggling, because as I became more conscious, I was having to live with my memories, especially some of these violent things that I did. Some of these things where I, not only did I get hurt, but things where I actually did hurt people, and having to, and my empathy grew, and my intuition grew. All that stuff became really difficult for me to deal with. And so it just put me into these deep depressions, and I didn't know what to do about it. And so when I got this great job offer, days before I fell, I remember I was living with a friend of mine. He goes by 9, like the number 9. But anyway, he's a great dude, and he's pretty deep and spiritual person himself. He says, "Hey Rex, I know you got this really great job offer, but I've noticed though you don't seem to have the kind of excitement that I would expect you to have. I mean, you're not like going out and celebrating. I mean, you haven't even asked us to go out and go celebrate your new job and the new position. I mean, you're just kind of biding your time till you start. I mean, what's going on? Are you okay? Canine." You're right. For some reason, this is my dream job. I've waited, like I said, my whole career for this job. And for some reason, I don't get it. I'm not excited. I don't feel it inside. I almost started crying like there in front of them. Like I didn't, because there were a couple of guys, whatever. But I did. I was just like really sad with my, because like how could this happen, that I finally got what I've been working for my whole adult life, and I'm not excited. I'm not happy about this. But the thing was, I didn't know what I was going to be happy about. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't know what else. I mean, this is what I'm preparing myself for. I've been training myself for. This is where all my experience was. But the only other thing I would have been able to do is go get like a retail job someplace. Which, forget it. That's, if you've ever done retail work, it's really brutally hard work. And yeah, just not. I wasn't interested in that. But so yeah, I just hung on to a lot of my darkness. I hung on to a lot of that anger, and it did it. And that's also partly too because I was such an angry person, and I always had such a bad temper. A lot of my upset would turn to anger, and then I would become self-abusive, and I would do things to hurt myself, because I would just be mad at myself that how could I ever allow these things to happen? How could I ever, especially considering the kind of person my mom raised me to be. My mom died when I was 22 years old, and this stuff happened after she died. I kind of fell off the deep end when she died. I didn't handle it very well, because so here I go, start crying over this. But my mom, she was my rock. But she's with me now. I feel her. She's very much one of my guides. but I cry sometimes because, there's still no substitute for a big mom hug. I can feel the hugs from within, but there's still, I'm in my physical body, and there's still no substitute for, being able to hug mom. But nonetheless, I didn't handle it well at all. I fell off the deep end. Basically, at that point, believe it or not, I was a stockbroker. I had just passed the Series 7 like 6 months before, which is a brutal test to pass. It's even harder than the bar, some people say. I was a finance major in college. I actually started my DJ career then, believe it or not. I had a production company, was DJing weddings and school dances and stuff. I made a lot of money, really, really busy. In fact, I was 22 years old, 21, 22, I already bought my first condo. I was doing great, brand new car, the whole bit. My mom died, and I won't dive into the details of it. I talk about it in my book, but I lost everything, lost it all. I didn't handle it. Within a year's time, I was on the streets, homeless and drug addicted. I became a speed freak. I was doing cocaine, a lot of meth, and anything speed. Back on the streets, I won't get into the colloquialisms, but there was a lot of the stuff on the streets that I was just doing, pills included. On top of which, I like to triple an acid all the time. And I never drank much. I never liked alcohol very much, but which was fine. I had enough of a habit with all that speed stuff, the coke, meth, and speed that I did, and that went on for a couple of years. So I was homeless, and eventually a friend of mine and my brother helped kind of dig me out and get me set up into a place to try to restart my life back over again. And that was a long road from that to the point where I got that job offer before my NDE. So yeah, the person that I was before and the person that I am now is changing. And the biggest thing is that of course, the visions are beautiful. I love the sense of, I guess, for lack of a better word, enlightenment, if I dare use the word, awakening, mindfulness, remembrance. But it all happened really because I was able to just finally let go of all these barriers. It was like I never realized on a metaphysical or metaphorical level, all of these hard memories, all these things that I was so angry about, they literally, that were walls in the way of me being able to see past into this deeper realm of reality, and more to the point, to this deeper sense of my being and what me as a person, despite my past, I'm still capable and potentially can be in this life. So the near-death experience did a couple of things then. So not only was it a chance to learn how to forgive, which I have, but also a chance to say, you know what, I'm going to start this thing all over again. I'm going to wipe the slate clean, and I'm going to be the person that I've always wanted to imagine that I could be. And if I may say this, because I love my mom and I still do, because there were times in my life when I was going through that stuff, all I could think, there'd be times I think to myself, gosh, if my mom is watching me right now, she must be just so disgusted. She must be so disappointed in me. And of course, I'd cry my eyes out over it, but then I couldn't do anything about it at the time. So I'm grateful now that the person that is emerging, person I'm becoming, even 10, 11 years later, is somebody I think my mom could be proud of. And that really, and that inspires me in and unto itself, because my mom was such an important and huge part of my life. And yes, if you haven't figured it out by now, I was a mama's boy, and I'm proud of that, because my mom was super, super cool. And I'm very, very blessed to have had this woman in my life. Even if she wasn't my mom, just having her in my life is a huge, giant blessing.
And we have more questions coming in, Rex.
Right.
What core principle did you hold on to throughout this change?
Well, at the risk of being cliche, just a core and keeping it very, very simple. And I need simple at this point in my life, the principle of love. And to me, love is basically, with a few things, I guess, but it's basically that which brings anything to its highest, purest, or best level, whether it's ourselves personally, individually as people, whether it's relationships with others, be it our significant other, to our friends, our parents, our pets, or our fuzzy four-legged family members, if you will. Or even just an experience of maybe going to the grocery store and picking up some groceries and interacting with a store worker, but just giving every single situation an opportunity to be as positive as it can. An example of that would be this. Speaking of, say a clerk at a convenience store, and it's just one of those little moments, and just trying to be mindful in a moment. There was a girl that was working behind the counter. I'm going to guess she was probably maybe Middle Eastern. She had a fairly thick accent, and the store was packed. She was really busy, and I'm standing in line, kind of observing this. And I realized it's the middle of the rush, and she's the only person in this whole convenience store. She probably, had some people call in sick, and she just got stuck by herself. and she's having to deal with this big mob of people who are basically now yelling at her and griping at her, and she's trying her very, very best to just get through everybody. And through this all, she's being very quiet. She hasn't said anything to anybody other than just, next, or how much, the whatever, however the total of what person had to pay was, or something like that. But she was definitely stressed out. And by the time I got to the front of the line, I'm just noticing this, and because I'm so crazy, empathic now, I'm feeling her stress. I'm feeling her upset. I could just tell she's like on the verge of tears. There's a big line of people behind me now too, so it's not like it's lighting up. And I stopped. I literally made a point to slow everything down, and I just said, "Hi, how are you doing today?" And she just talked to me a little bit, and I said, "Just so you know, I just want you to take a moment, if you would, and everybody here will be okay with that." And I turned around and looked at everybody. We'll be okay with that. Just take a deep breath, and I want you to know you are doing a great job. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, you're doing freaking awesome. Take this one thing at a time, and you got this. And she put a big smile on her face. She did it. She totally took a break. She did. She stepped back, took a deep breath, and of course, I'm 6'4". Nobody said anything. But anyway, she did. She took a deep breath, said her thank yous to me. We got finished up, and I could hear the voice. And I kind of turned around as I was walking out the door. She was much more calm. Everybody just kind of got in line. Instead of standing around the counter with her, they all actually got in line. Everything was very orderly, and everybody seemed to be nice as I was leaving the store, and she was fine. So I hope the rest of her day got better after that. But it's just one of those things that, if there's one thing I'm going to just hold to, it's just love. And in every situation that I'm in, if I have an opportunity to make a little bit of a difference, even if it's something as seemingly mundane as that, I do.
Okay. Joseph, do you want to ask your question directly, or do you want me to ask it for you? Okay, I guess I'll ask it. Did your perception of self-love change after your NDE? Do you find it easier to talk to yourself as if you love yourself? Can you recall what it was like to forgive yourself for the first time?
Yeah, and add on to that. So you were angry and all that stuff before. What happened during the NDE? How did you then see yourself after?
Okay, well, that's a great thing you brought up, because one of the things I have here, and this is a really powerful thing. Now, there's a lot to this. Yes, I hated myself. I had such a sense of just incredible self-loathing before. And I think that's one of the reasons why I had such a hard time, letting myself be happy in my life before my NDE. It took a long time to finally learn to get past that point where I can stand in front of the mirror. And I love to ask this sometimes even as an exercise, because I'm astounded at the reactions and the responses I get from people sometimes, because how few of us literally can stand in front of a mirror, look yourself deep in the eyes and say, "I love you. I really do. I may not always be happy with you, but I really do love you." But my self-perception from before to after has changed profoundly, and getting back to that concept of forgiveness, it's really what it's boiled down to, is because when I did that, I just peeled off the most gigantic, most massive of layers of toxicity, of negativity I didn't even really realize was there, and I didn't realize was affecting me in such a profound level. Allowing myself to be happy, allowing myself to actually receive love. I've always been this person where it's like, I don't need anything. I'm independent. I've done so much in my life by myself. I've been through so much of the hardest experiences in my life by myself that, I'm going to do this by myself. And I thought that was real strength. I always thought people that needed other people were just being needy and weak. And among my greatest of lessons since the NDE is that it's quite the opposite of that. Don't get me wrong, it takes a really strong person to be able to be alone and function being on yourself and not have help. I'm not going to take away from that at all. You've got to be darn strong to be able to function like that. But it's also a really lonely existence. But having said that, it takes a lot more strength to open up and allow yourself to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to reach out and even ask for help, which I never like doing. Even now in my career, I need help, some things to move this career forward. And I'm reluctant to do that because there are things that I was able to do before that I just can't do now. And sometimes I get frustrated by that and I get kind of mad by that, but the true strength is in us coming together. And this is where we are all at our strongest, is when we work together. The cool thing about this is, however strong you can be on your own, bring two like-minded loving souls together, connected. It doesn't double the strength. It makes that strength exponentially stronger. I don't know how to quantify that. and then get a third or a fourth, and then turn it into a group, maybe turn it into a whole community of people. That power is just, that's an indomitable kind of a power that can absolutely ripple effect throughout an entire world, evoking the kind of free change that we seek for everybody, so we can all find our own way, find our own best self, and what to us is, how we perceive ourselves in our best state, as opposed to getting caught up in the dogmas of this life and what this life sometimes tells us what we are and what we aren't. You're kind of becoming a product of our environment, as opposed to being one that's influencing the environment, and realizing that you have, I want to call it control, but you do have influence, and you have the capacity to guide and move and influence, if you will, and take things in various different directions based on what you're given, and also based on the people that you're working with, including the spirits and the guides and everybody that are part of what I call the soul family, if you will. I think a lot of us probably use that expression in terms of soul family. Anyway, did I answer that? There was something else I think I maybe was in that question.
I guess you found it easier to talk to yourself as if you love yourself.
Yes, and I do. And don't get me wrong. One of the things, and I imagine we all go through this. I know a lot of us have sometimes a problem liking ourselves, let alone loving ourselves. Since I had this brain injury, things like I have a very terrible sense of direction. My memory is just terrible. I sometimes can't remember just seconds in the past. You give me a phone number or an address, if I don't put it in my phone right away, I will forget it within seconds. Sometimes I can be in the middle of my day and just forget what the heck I'm doing and where I'm going, and I got to literally kind of backtrack my steps and even look at my calendar and do things to try to recall what in the world is going on. Things that were so easy for me before are such a huge challenge and cause me tremendous anxiety, stress, and sometimes upset. It's just, despite the moments where I can get very frustrated with myself, and there are times I might even look in the mirror and yell at myself. It is frustrating, and I'm sorry to say, but I never stopped loving myself through it all. The only reason I get upset, the only reason I get frustrated, is because I really want me to be the best me I can be. I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm not doing it out of anger or anything like that, even though I do get angry, but I'm not doing it for that reason. I really am pushing myself to be at my best, because I believe in the neuroplasticity of the brain. Despite my brain injury, and despite the insistence by my neurologist that I have a damaged brain, I believe the brain can be rewired, and I can believe that, with work and time, the things that are weaknesses right now they may not be the strengths that they were before, but they can get to the point where they can become working parts of my experience, where I don't have to feel so deficient about certain things, and sometimes this leads me to such frustration. But through it all, I never lose sight of the love. And sometimes I know parents will do this with their children. I mean, they get upset with their children. They'll be hard on their children, not because they're trying to be mean, because they're trying to make a point. They're trying to show them something. They're trying to teach them something. They're trying to help them be better. So yes, everything I do, again, even when I'm being hard on myself, is all out of love.
And
Are you able to be more compassionate with yourself now? Did you take away the compassion that was shown towards you in your NDE? And now you can be more compassionate with yourself than you were before? Absolutely, yes. So it's very important that if I'm going to be hard on myself at times, that it's very important that when I'm doing right and I'm in that good space, that I nurture that as well. I acknowledge that with just as much passion. So absolutely, I'm very much about, it sounds kind of funny to say, but self-love, self-nurturing, self-care, and making sure, again, in that respect, I can be at my best, because I can't be at my best if all I'm going to do is ridicule myself. So I've got to make sure to have that balance, and not lose sight of the idea that I only get hard on myself because I want to make myself better. And so when I am in the space doing and functioning and flowing the way I like, yes, I completely will give the proverbial pat on the back for that too. Make sure that's part of it, and remind myself that yes, I do love you, and thank you. You're doing great. Right now, you're awesome. So tell us why you called your book "My Experiment with Gravity," and does that have to do with falling out of the tree, or what's the meaning behind the title? That's a great and fun question. Yes, the question has very symbolic meaning. I'm not going to dive into it today, but among my many epiphanies since the NDE is I have these ideas on gravity's relationship to a multi-universal reality and consciousness. And in the process, I'm explaining why gravity is dark energy and answering some other very difficult and long-held questions in science, which I'm not going to dive into right now.
But interestingly, the reason for the title of the book has nothing to do with that. It's more of a coincidence because that came later. Those epiphanies just came a few years ago. The reason for the name of the book is more a reference to the falling out of the tree. And because I'm a grown man who fell out of a tree, and yes, despite how devastating it was, and it still is, I've tended to make a joke out of it. I try to make light of it. So during that time, afterwards, those months after I got out of the hospital, people would be asking me how I'm doing and stuff like that, and not quite be sure to they should call it an accident or the fall or what to call it. So I would jokingly say, oh, my experiment with gravity. Oh, let me tell you, that experiment didn't go real well for me, but gravity works, or make some joke about that. and so it just became a long running joke with everybody when people would talk to me, hey, Rex, so how you feeling since your experiment with gravity? And, so I didn't write the book. The book came out, about 3 or so, 4, no, gosh, it was about 5, 6, 7 years after the NDE. So gosh, so yes, it'd been a long running joke that had been going on for just, the whole tenure of the time that I was leading up to the writing of the book. So naturally, the title of the book had to be My Experiment with Gravity. And it's only been just a nice little icing on the cake that all of a sudden I have these crazy epiphanies about gravity that actually people in the scientific community that are listening to me and talking to me about because they think I might really have something here. And of course, the other joke is, Newton had ideas on gravity too, and he had an apple fall on his head, and supposedly he had an epiphany about gravity. Well, guess what? Well, I fell out of a tree on my head and had an epiphany about gravity. But anyway, getting back to the title of the book, the reason is just because it's more of a joke that I made of just calling it, the fall out of the tree, just referring to that as my experiment with gravity.
And so what's the number one thing, because we want everybody to download their free copy here and to do a review for you on Amazon. What would you say is the number one takeaway or the number one message, if you can, of the book?
I would say that anything is possible. Let's see here. One of the things that I did is remove all limitations, no matter where you are in your life, who you are, or what you think you're capable of, or what you're thinking maybe you're not capable of. Just realize that it's possible. Despite the near-death experience, yes, that was a giant catalyst, the key catalyst to me making this massive transformation. But I've insisted many times it doesn't require an NDE to do this. There's a lot of ways to get here. And it really starts with you making the decision within yourself that, no, you're right, anything really is possible. And when you start to think that way, you might realize how many different ways you are holding yourself back from your dreams, from the things that maybe you really should be doing in this life if you're not already doing it. This is more for the people that are like me, finding their way still. I mean, I'm still not quite where I really want to be, but at the same time, I know I'm on the right journey. I'm on the right path. Everything resonates. I can't imagine doing anything else. And I would suggest to you the same idea. If you're not already feeling that way, getting up every day and feeling like, you know what, I'm looking forward to tackling today. What do I get to do today? Rather you're waking up and dreading your day because you can't stand what you're doing. Maybe you make a lot of money doing it. Maybe you're good at it, but you can't stand it. Maybe think about that. What are the steps that you can take? And I'm not going to suggest such a transformation, such a transition in life will ever be easy, especially doing it later in life. But the question is, how much does it really mean to you while you still have breath in your body? Something I often bring up in these presentations is a book by a former hospice nurse by the name of Bronnie Ware. She's out of London, and I first heard about her right after my NDE before she even wrote her book. And at that point, all she had is a list of the top 5 regrets of the dying. Being a hospice nurse, she spent a lot of years talking to people who are in the process of getting ready to cross over, of course. And in talking to all of these people, she collected, thoughts on what they said they wish, what they said in terms of how they could have lived their life differently had they chance to do it over again. And the things that were constantly coming through, and I don't have the top 5 in front of me, definitely check that out, and also check out her book. But basically, it was a repeat of, I wish I would have spent more time doing the things that I dreamed about. I wish I would have made a point to live my dreams more. I wish I would have made a point not to make money and work so important. I wish I would have spent more time with my family and my partner in life. I wish I would have told more people that I love them. I wish I would have spent more time doing things like enjoying a beautiful mountain view or looking out over the ocean. These were the common responses from, I guess, all different kinds of walks of life, from people that she was working with in hospice that were dying. And as a near-death experiencer, and of course, very fresh out of a near-death experience, coming across something like this, that immediately resonated with me to say that if there's that one giant takeaway, and this is really what my book is all about, is to show what is truly possible in a person's life, and based on how much, I guess, you really want it and how important it really is to you while you still have breath in this body. Because think about it. I mean, hopefully most of us here have a while yet before we get to that point. But imagine if tonight was your last night on earth. Tonight you're going to go to sleep and you're not going to wake up tomorrow. This is it. How do you really feel about your life right now? Have you really done everything you really wanted to do? A question I like to ask is, what did you dream about when you were a child? What did you envision yourself being as an adult when you were a child? How close to that are you as an adult? When you were a child and you envisioned yourself as an adult, what kind of person did you envision yourself being? And as children, I think a lot of us do that. I know I certainly did. So
there's another question.
Sorry, just real quick. Sorry, I just had to collect my thoughts for a second. It's getting in touch with that part of you. I mean, this is not how I want $1 million. Don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, the money's part of our life. We know it's part of the experience and whatnot. It's not about, hey, I want a new car, but it's more about, the quality of my life. When I wake up in the morning, what do I really want to do with my day? And again, we live in a monetized world. So if that being the case, how can I find a way to monetize that? And given technology and everything that's going on these days, just about, it seems like everything can be monetized in one form or another, even if you just, somehow find your way to becoming a YouTube or TikTok star or something like that, based on your ideas and your thoughts and your say, maybe you've got poetry or art, or you have your own collection of sayings or your own books or something like that. I understand that there's ways of doing just about anything you really want to do. The question is, are you willing to do what's needed to go from where you are right now to that point where you really want to be, where you really have a chance to be in a place to fulfill those life dreams and become the kind of person you really want to be, and being your best self. So that biggest takeaway, there's a lot of those, but it's just anything's possible. There are no limits to this reality. Personally, I feel like I can take this journey, and granted, I got a long ways to go, but I feel like I can take this journey all over the world and just talk to people of all walks of life, from all over the world. And I've got ideas not just for future books, but I even want to make a film at some point where I talk to people all over the world about dreams, not just for themselves, but also for the whole world, and show how many people, no matter where they come from, older, younger, religion, culture, what have you, really just want the same thing that we all want. And in understanding that, then, all right, how do we take the steps in getting there? Of course, we need to do that individually. We need to have our own house in order. Then as we do that, how do we help raise each other up so we can get all of our houses in order, so to speak, and raise up the whole world? I feel like that's where the real power is going to be, in terms of where any real shift of transitions are going to happen. It's not likely going to happen on a governmental kind of a level. It's not likely going to happen on big corporate levels, but it's likely going to happen here first. Maybe that stuff will catch up down the road, but it's going to happen with all of us in conversations like this, with groups like this, empowering ourselves and empowering each other, and realizing every one of us has unlimited universal potential, and stepping up to that. And again, one of my many quotes I like to use is, the more of us living the life of our dreams, the closer we come to living in the world of our dreams. And that's out of my experiment with gravity. That's from the book.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that came in. Doesn't your NDE give you a better understanding of eternity? Would the perspective of eternity tell you to relax, you've got forever, because it's not where you're going or the end point, it's the journey and what happens during the entire journey. Isn't it all journey? What do you think about that?
I don't entirely agree with that. I think it's about the entire process. And if the experience in the moment is important to you, then you're going to feel the moment. I think it's personally unrealistic to say that when you love people, obviously those experiences with those people become important. So if something's going to be off, maybe you have a difference with one of those people. It's not, to me, realistic to say I'm not going to hurt over that, because I'm attached to this person in this life and this experience. And if I'm going to be living on this journey and on this path lovingly, that also means treating those situations, those attachments with loving purpose while I'm in this experience. So as long as I'm here, I'm going to make the most of every single solitary lived experience it may be, no matter how mundane or grandiose it could be or anything in between. And ultimately, we do go home. We're all going to go to the same destination, but we have a lot of different ways to get there, a lot of different experiences along the way, and they're all unique. Your soul journey is different from my soul journey, different from Shaun's and different from Katie's and everybody here. And also, we're unique as individual people. Even across the multiple realities, we're still 100% unique. And again, I guess another big takeaway is I want to live. If I'm going to be here and I'm going to live, then I really want to live. And I want to experience all the most amazing and wonderful things are experienced in this experience before it's time for me to move on to the next. And the beautiful thing is that I'm in a place where if it's time to go right now, I'm very much at peace with that. I'm ready for the next part of the journey right now. But I know because of a night like this, I still have things to do here. And as long as I still have those things to do here, this stuff's going to be important to me. And yes, if for some reason this fell apart tonight and it went really poorly, I would be super sad. There's no way I could leave this and go, oh, tra la la, it's going to be okay in the long run because I'm going to end up home anyway. Well, right now in this here and now, it's not okay. And that is not necessarily a step in the direction of journeying home to me. So my part of my journey home, at least for my own soul experiences, to nurture every one of these experiences and make the most of every one of them in the moment. And that includes sometimes being hurt over it, sometimes being crying over it, sometimes missing somebody over it. To me, that reflects back what I said earlier about what has become my true strengths in allowing myself to be vulnerable and be open and allowing that kind of connection with other people, whereas before I shunned that.
So back to the NDE, somebody asked me, so what was your understanding of God, source, the creator before your NDE versus what you experienced and now? What could you say to that?
Well,
did you believe in God before or as a universal source? And then in the NDE, did you experience something like that?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned a little bit ago, the biggest difference I would say is what I thought about with God before was more a matter of just keeping an open mind to the possibility of God. But my perception of God, though, at the time, if there was a God, was more of the idea of what a lot of people have of a male figure that's separate from everything else, that's up on this giant pedestal, somehow lording above all of us. I didn't see it as, what I see it now, which is much more infused. Now I understand that at the soul level, we are all God, every one of us. We are all already directly connected to source. We are already source. Basically, we're all little bits and pieces of God experiencing through each and every one of us as we experience this source level of our being. So that is the biggest difference, simply put, from my perspective of God before versus my perspective of God now, is that I see the oneness, and I also see the divinity, not just in this idea of this separate essence. And I see that God, don't get me wrong, I still kind of see that in a way too, but I also see it as much more infused. So when I look at you, I look at other people, I look at plants, trees, and clouds, I'm also still seeing God. And then when I start going within and I start exploring those quantum realms, or those Akashic realms, if you want to call it that, the spiritual realms, to me, that's all I'm experiencing God. That is all God to me. And take that a step further. Personally, I identify with God as goddess. And I don't want to dive into the male-female dynamic too much, other than to say that a reason for that is, simply put, the mother divinity is the creator. The mother is the creator, the giver. That to me is what really gives life. That's the nurturing element. That is the aspect that is creation itself. The male dynamic obviously is an infused part of it and a key and important ingredient of it, but I feel like the female really is the underlying essence. So when I think of God nowadays, I tend to think of God in terms of a she, sometimes rather than a he. But at the same time, I've often said too, God at the core is also both female and male, but at the same time, neither, because God really is God in its own unique form of being.
So another person asked about dreams. Just to explain like how you perceive dreams to be on different levels.
I feel like dreams are all part of the reality. Did anybody, I imagine some folks here have seen the movie Inception. Now, the movie Inception, to me, I didn't necessarily go along with all their interpretations of the way they explored the dream levels, but what I liked about Inception is how they explored that there are levels of consciousness that are going on here. And each of these levels of consciousness basically have a different set of physics, if you will. They work differently. They don't work the way the brick and mortar reality does. But yet all those levels are just as much a part of reality as what we consider this brick and mortar reality is. In many ways, to me, those realities represent getting closer to source. You're getting closer. This is the more honest, the more real part of your own being. There is no deception here. There's no anything but just your own pure being, essentially, in a way, communicating with you. And as far as what the dream could actually be, there's that I have a presentation for that, but that's definitely easily a couple plus hour long conversation by itself, getting into what dreams mean to us, the different kinds of dreams, dreaming when you're sleeping, dreaming versus when you're waking, getting into what's called hypnagogic dreaming, which is that space right between waking and sleeping, which is a great space to meditate in if you've experienced that before. But dreaming to me are all that whole, like those layers of reality getting into, to me, the ultimate dream is what I experience in my NDE. That to me is the real dream. So getting deeper into the source of what people might think of as being getting further away from reality, to me is getting closer to the true reality. Because every one of these are parts of ourselves and parts of our reality that are very crucial and important. And when you explore them and you learn about them and you grow through them, there's almost always has some kind of really profound impact on us to be able to do that. Our dreams are so powerful that way. So in that context, they're just as real, if not more real to me than, again, this brick and mortar reality is. Or is the burner reality? I like that. I like the term in burner culture, the Burning Man culture, is called default reality. And I tend to use that a lot. So if you don't mind, I might just kind of use that in terms of when you go out to work, you go out and have to be out in the world. That's the default reality. And then things like this, what we're talking about here, this is reality in terms of the brick and mortar, our lives here. This represents to me, the kind of reality I wish we could be living in all the time. But anyway, I digress.
I want to check with Daniela. She has a hand raised. I want to give her the opportunity to unmute and talk. Here we go.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much, Rex, and everyone for being on here and just like creating a collective energy. It's really powerful. And I wanted to ask Rex a question, or anyone really that can resonate with this, which is, when we make a choice and it's not the right choice and we realize it and it's difficult to get out of it, or it's difficult to make a new choice. I guess the question that I'm asking is, in the spiritual realm, outside of the default reality, it's often easy to just think of the next best thing because our minds are wired that way, to like program and to figure it out. But on the spiritual plane, sometimes it's all we're being asked to do all the time, potentially, is just be patient and just to allow, because everything universally is always happening for our good. And so I'm asking the question because I'm finding myself at this stage in my life, I feel a bit like I'm not really sure if I'm making the right choices. And the reason I feel that way is because I'm getting an indicator that I don't feel good, that the choice that I've made is actually not the right choice. And I didn't know until I made the choice. And now I have this uncomfortable feeling. And so should I stay patient? And should I allow that the universe is working out in my good all the time? And or should I take another action?
Do you have a vision of what you're seeking in this, and what is your idea of your best future, your best life, your best? I mean, what are you thinking about in terms of your own self with relation to where you're going? Do you have a vision for that?
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is, I think for me, and maybe for others here, maybe for you too, Rex, the vision is so vast. It could be anything at any moment, right? Because I know of the possibilities, right? And so do I have a vision? Absolutely. And I feel kind of feel like when I'm on the vision or when I'm on the path, it feels good. And when I'm not in the vision or on the right path, it doesn't feel good. And so does that resonate with you or anyone else? And so yeah, what do you do with that?
I want to hear from other people on this too. This is a really, I think, a very important thing to get into here. I'm sorry, ask that question one more time.
Daniela, I would just say really quickly, your inner guidance is telling you when you say when you're on the path and you're feeling good, or when you're not on it and you're feeling bad, your own inner guidance system is there to guide you along the way. And really, if you learn to listen to that, you won't go wrong.
I'd like to add to that.
Okay, let's everybody, we're gonna call on people whose hands are up. Do you want to do that, Katie? Call on people.
So next, Kelly.
Can I say something before we get into the next questions?
Yes.
I think I'm good. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So, one of the things that I've experienced, especially in these last 10 years, is I'm doing my best to resonate on taking the steps towards getting to my highest path. Sometimes I've noticed there are definitely those times where it seems like whatever set of choices are, none of them really resonates that much. So I find myself sometimes trying to make the most of whatever the situation is. And you mentioned something about sometimes making a wrong decision. I've just learned sometimes if I do that, sometimes I've got to let something write itself out before I kind of reset myself and take the steps to redo whatever it is I was trying to do. And sometimes that's part of the trial and error of learning how to manifest and how to take the steps towards your ultimate goals in this life. So that's been something that's been developing and growing, and I'm still sorting that out myself as well. But yes, I think what Shaun just said, focusing on resonating on what you feel like is the most loving aspect of it, because sometimes patience is needed. But I also find too that there's been times I thought I was being patient, the time's going by and there's just nothing happening. I keep thinking I'm putting the intentions out there, then I have to then ask the question. And maybe this is a question to ask yourself as well. If you feel like things aren't going on and maybe something should, it's like, okay, well, what can I do right now? What could I actually do in this moment right now? If I'm gonna take action, if it's just that one thing I can just do to make some kind of a difference and take a step in the right direction, even if it's only to bring you back towards a feeling of resonance that you're on your best path again. Because it's easy to get off that path. And something I also speculate on too, and Katie and I were talking about this recently, especially for those of us that are transitioning and shifting, I think sometimes perhaps spirit universe is almost like finding a way to reinforce how much that really means to us. And one of the ways that might happen is it challenges you to show you just to find out, how serious are you? How committed to this are you? How much does this really mean to you? So you may end up going through periods where you're going to feel a little less fulfilled. Maybe you might even feel cold inside. Maybe even have nights like I've had where I'm like, what the heck am I even doing here right now? I don't even know what to think right now. Persevere through those. And even when you have that, think about it. Okay, well, why am I in this moment right now? Why do I feel this way? What is upsetting me? That helps you to stay aware of where you're at. And it's okay to also stay in that space and be honest with spirit and say, okay, you know what, spirit, I'm not happy with this right now. Okay, I get there's a bigger plan and all that, but you know what, right now I'm not getting it and I need a little help here. Can we do something about this? If you need to move forward on the path, help me out here. So again, there's so many different variations and possibilities just depending on what's going on, but at the same time, just open it up, explore, and think about it. If there's something that you can do in the moment, then go ahead and do it. And at the same time, if there really just isn't, you think about it, and it just isn't, then maybe patience really is just for the moment. But keep checking back in, because you don't want to be patient for too long. At some point, action is likely going to be needed. Okay, next. I don't know what order everybody's in, so Shaun, help me out there.
Okay, so Kelly, I think your hand was up next.
Okay, all right. Thank you for this moment. I can respond to this. What I feel from you, dear, is that you don't trust yourself all that much, and you have a lot of guilt and self-analyzation going on. And I'm a violinist, and I'm a high-level violinist, a professional violinist, so I understand this. And what I've had to learn is that you do take detours. You will make mistakes according to your paradigms, according to your gut, but your gut is telling you that things are there for purpose. And I'm going to tell you, you're right. And I want you to trust that. The universe is not here to destroy us. We don't have to go through the game in one lifetime. We don't have to become anything for us to be loved and be complete. We are love. We are complete.
Thank you, Kelly. So that's for Daniela, right? What we want to do is we want to focus on asking Rex questions.
I didn't understand. I thought we were.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, and that was great. That was actually beautiful what you said.
Okay.
I just don't want us to spend the next 20 minutes answering Daniela's question right now, because we were here to ask Rex questions. So what I would like people to do is ask questions of Rex. We can deal with comments later, but for now, let's ask Rex questions about his NDE, about his book, about dreams. Let's go with that one if you can.
Rex, I'm a
Yes.
violinist, and I know that energy that you have will make you a good musician, and what you're trying to do is be a good director. That's your dream, right? So does love help you be better at those things?
Are you talking about like the creation when I'm writing music, you mean, or just in general?
It is a creation process. How does it work? How does it
I'm
help
totally
you?
channeling this. I'm totally tapping into the soul being. I'm going forward to do this because I don't know music theory. I don't know what key anything's in. But when you listen to the music, if you didn't know that already, you would assume that I did. Because everything is in key and everything is fluid and it all works. Whether you like the piece or not like the piece, it definitely is a cohesive piece of music. And I have like over 40 of them in 3 years and way more coming. So many already started and a lot more on the way. And I'm also mixing and mastering as well. I don't know that I'm going to be qualified to say conduct an orchestra or anything like that, but I definitely would love to see some of my music get played with a symphony orchestra. And being a violinist, I have pieces of music that incorporate both electronics with traditional instruments, including a lot of strings, because I love strings, including violin and I also do cello too. I have a couple cool like cello solos and some pieces, but I have a lot of violins and strings. I use clarinet and piano and a lot of instruments to go along with the electronics. And some of my pieces, they're beat driven as well, just depending. Some of my pieces are just straight dance tracks meant for the club, but other pieces I make are meant more for something like maybe what you're doing. And it is, it's all love. I don't think I could do any of this because I'll say, yeah, okay. One part of the question was how you do this through love is I can't do this. One of the things I've noticed is that because of my sensitivities being the way they are, and I really am a delicate flower at this point, it takes very little to get me off of this sometimes. I can't work. I literally can't write my books. I couldn't do a presentation like this. I can't work on my music if I'm not in this space. If anything pulls me out of it, I'm stressed, anxiety hits me, anger hits me, anything like that hits me, I can't work. If I'm around people that are stressing me, even in small ways, I can't work. I am literally that delicate of a balance of being able to be in the spaces I need to be to do something like compose a piece of music, for example. So it is, if I can't be living in a loving, peaceful space, I can't do my work, very simply put, at this point in my life. Anything else, Kelly, or you want to go to Pamela?
Yeah, Pamela Thrift.
Hello. Okay, I'll try to be succinct because I did also have a response for Daniela, which I can leave till later.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can just do it quickly. I just don't want to spend too much time there right now.
My near-death experience happened 34 years ago, and I've been interviewed by people, and they say that I'm so incredibly well integrated, etc. It's a lifelong process. Grounding has helped me the most, and I found it very interesting that you wanted to start with the meditation that had the angelic choir there. I was wondering if that was the Korg M1 keyboards, because I find that part of why I tap into groups like this is to remind myself of the truth of my being, the validity of my visioning, that we are all connected when we're having day-to-day stuff that is really not reflecting that back to us in the world. There's a serious challenge. But some of you may have been on a meditation group that I was in this last week, or no, 2 weeks ago. Put your intention at your solar plexus. Notice how it feels to visualize whatever the problem or situation is, and then draw it up to your third eye. And oh my goodness, what an amazing shift happens. I find that I immediately move into that higher perspective and the overview. So solar plexus, draw it up to the third eye, the end. And so that my only question there was, what is it, the Korg M1 keyboards that you use? Because a lot of near-death experiencers like the angelic choir on the Korg M1 keyboards.
As far as the piece of music that we use for the meditation, that was not one of mine. So I cannot tell you what kind of keyboard or if it was done maybe on Ableton or DAW type of software. It's basically a binaural beat. You can get, if you go on YouTube, you just type in binaural beats. There's tons and tons of them. They're used for everything from meditation, energy clearing, sleeping, all kinds of different purposes, and they're all different frequencies to help stimulate those different parts of the brain that are supportive of that. So I'm not sure what instrument was used, but that was basically taken from one of my favorite binaural tones that I meditate to, that I thought would really be appropriate and for this meditation.
Yeah, no, it definitely was, definitely. And I'm still fascinated by the amazing parallels and similarities amongst everyone's experience, from language to experiences to, yeah. So just keep on doing you.
Well, it's great to know you. I appreciate that, because sometimes I get the feeling very, very alone in this world. And I appreciate, when somebody connect with somebody like you, Oliver, and this goes for everybody in a group like this, but sometimes I don't meet many NDEers that really identify with the kind of NDE that I've had. I can honestly say in 11 years time, almost 11 years, you're probably the fourth, maybe fifth person that resonates on the kind of NDE that I've had. And it's not to say anything's more or less. I'm not saying it that way at all, just different. For whatever reason, I had the type of NDE that I did. Whereas, if you've heard other NDEers speak, and a lot of those NDEers are a little bit more, I guess, humanized in a way. You're dealing more directly with specific types of beings and councils and tunnels and things like that. I didn't have that kind of an experience. So again, it's not to say one is, more significant than the other, because as far as I'm concerned, if you had an NDE and it changed your whole life, then well, that's about as significant as it gets. But in my case, I appreciate meeting people like you, because I've only met just a handful. And it does. I sometimes get the feeling very lonely at times, and it kind of helps me to just remember that there are those other people who've had these kinds of experiences and these kinds of feelings and these kinds of thoughts. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. And the energy is squared. You were wondering about why meeting with other people. From the Bible, where two or more are gathered, there I am also. But the physics principle is, if two people come together, it's the same as 2 times 2. So it's the same as 4 individuals doing the work, as versus coming together as a group.
Well,
so we have, I don't know how many people we have here, but take whatever that number is times itself. So if it's 25 times 25.
Thank you, Pamela. We'll talk about that a little later. We want to get back to questions.
Okay.
But yeah,
so Gary
I agree with
Austin.
basically, that is true. When 2 people come together, it's not like it doubles the energy; it's exponential, the increase. So when you get 10 people together, it's not 10 times the energy; it's exponential, the increase. So I hear you. Anyway, go ahead.
Gary.
So Rex, this has been wonderful. I kept putting up symbols to say, great to hear you. I resonate with a lot of your experience. The imagery, the words, I just wanted to say, thank you and validate. It's a lot of what you said. It supports us in being very alone sometimes and having these very profound experiences with the light. And it's like, how do you know all this stuff? It's like, I have a connection and sometimes it just flows in. But wonderful to be in your presence and to hear all of these amazing things that you do as who you are. It's great. It's great.
Oh, man, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that a lot.
Somebody sent me a question, Rex. What did you learn about light versus darkness in your NDE? Is darkness an absence of light or something else?
My personal perception, again, is darkness and light are essentially different sides of the same coin. But for the sake of the experience, it's kind of like, all right, this is going to get a little esoteric here, but among my NDE visions, if you will, is going back to, we might call the beginning, if you will, beginning of karma, beginning of the experience. I feel like there was a split. In order for there to be an experience, it's like the divine being just a divine by itself. It didn't have anything to reflect off of. There was no point of experience. It was simply just in its own loneliness, in a manner of speaking. And I feel like, in a way, it kind of gave into the ultimate temptation of wanting to know. It's sort of like, even the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible, I think, has a certain metaphor behind that, with respect to the idea that they were in this garden of innocence. They were in this place. They were protected. If they all they had to do was just be in that place, and they could have that innocence for their whole existence. But at some point, they were tempted by wanting to know, well, what else is there besides innocence? They decided they needed to know what was beyond the garden, if you will. In a way, it's almost like a representation of the divine having that similar kind of a temptation of going, you know what? There's, as the pure essence of being, I am love. I am light and life, and I am the core of all that, which even doesn't exist. It exists yet, but it's okay. So it kind of gave into that temptation of going, you know what? I want to know, what am I, and what does this mean, and what am I doing here, holding on to all this being that I am? I need to understand this. And with that came a sort of energetic mitosis that took place, where the dark essentially, in a way, split from the light, kind of like a cellular division in a way. It's kind of an analogy I kind of like to use for that. And then from that, the division continued to divide. The dark cells continued to divide. They interacted with each other. And all of a sudden, there was this big gray area of cells dividing in the middle of all of this. And these cells represent all of us in the experience. But these first two cells, if you think about it, are the source of, experientially speaking, are the dark and the light. But what began all of this was the light, was the original source itself, which is pure love. And most of us can identify with love as being light. So in its essence, it is light. Simply put, light can exist without dark, but dark cannot exist without light. And this is why. Light is self-sustaining, self-healing, self-perpetuating. The dark simply is self-destructive. And if the dark is left to its own devices, it will only destroy itself. Ultimately, the dark needs the light doesn't need the dark. That's among the reasons why I feel that which is born of light, including the darkest of the dark, which goes out into the experience, some of those points of light end up in some really dark places, i.e. Lucifer, devils, demons, eventually find their way back home to light. But obviously a journey for such a being back home is going to be a really brutal, difficult, maybe potentially a really long, hard journey versus a journey of another soul that maybe didn't begin in such a place, in experientially speaking. So like you have these two sources to begin with. You've got the source itself all by itself. It gives into some form of temptation of wanting to know what it really is and understand. With it comes the first form of experience. You've got the essence of the dark and the light. So with this, maybe we could call this God and the devil. And again, from all of that splits off into this vast, immense gray area where ultimately all of our experiences start to come into play as we begin to find our way back home. And like I mentioned earlier, I do feel like we really are all the divine. We are God experiencing. I mean, God is literally experiencing through us. I mean, one of the ways God learns is through all of our experiences. One of the things that makes God all-knowing is because God is the experience of all things. And that happens through every one of us, not just here on planet Earth, but perhaps throughout the entirety of the universe. I feel like the whole universe, even in a context of the universal embodiment by itself, that is a form of embodiment, having its own kind of an experience, also connected to the divine the same way we are. Thank you, Gary.
Great. Do you have a passage that you wanted to share from your book? You had mentioned that you might want to, is there something that you wanted to highlight or read from there?
Yeah, I know we talked about that, before we were kind of setting this all up. I almost slipped my mind. Thank you, Shaun. But yeah, I mean, considering we've been talking about dreams and in my book, yes, it's an autobiography. I get into my life story before, talk about where I've been, talk about the drug addiction years, the years I fought, and talk about my family, my upbringing, talk about my beautiful, amazing mom. And of course, I go into the near-death experience and talk about some of the epiphanies that came from that. And then after, I talk about how did I change? How did I make those changes? Because while I had this beautiful gift of an NDE, I still have to do the work. And anyone who's been through these experiences, it's not like it's a gimme. If anything, it gets more difficult and more challenging to stay the course, because now you've got this whole, at least for me, this whole newfound realm of sensitivities and intuitions and psychic abilities I never even knew I was capable of. And I learned, that's when the whole epiphany about dreams came to be. And so I wrote the book based on the premise of dreams. And I used the quote as the very first thing in the book itself. And so I launched right into the concept of dreaming. So I'm going to literally read from chapter 1, the first two paragraphs of the book. And as I say, I don't know if you can see that here, the very top of the book right there is, all that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. What are dreams? Is this all a dream within a dream within a dream? Simply yes. This whole reality is infinitely vast, yet the most subtle and delicate experience of the divine. More to the point, is all the divine imagination manifesting the ultimate dream through infinite experience. It's dreaming and expanding consciousness into the experience through each and every possibility in love, fear, thought, feeling, and idea, no matter how fleeting or enduring. But also, divine consciousness is expanding through each duality and relationship of each and everything, of each other and everything. Without the dualities and relationships, there could be no experience and no you and me. This includes the imagination and dreams of every part of our experience, and all of us individually and collectively. All of creation is the collective dream of the imagination of the singular divine being. Every person and every experience is a key part of this divine dream. Dreams are the essence of the deepest foundations of each one of us, connected and interwoven intricately together in the divine imagination in one singular divine dream. This book is not as much about near-death experience as it is about dreams. Yes, it was inspired by a near-death experience, and we'll dive into that. However, it's about the dreams of a small, still innocent child. It's about growing up, and like many of us, losing sight of those dreams when assimilating into life as an adult in the real world. One day, I had a traumatic experience that could have and perhaps should have ended my life. It was a catalyst that opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for me. It was also the rediscovery of the child within and of my lost dreams. As a child, I always had the most vivid dreams, both waking and sleeping. I had quite the colorful imagination. I had many waking dreams, or daydreams, if you will. I would dream of the many different amazing possibilities of how my life could unfold, even as a child. I thought of the potential experience of love I could have with someone with whom I could grow old. Even before I knew what sex was, I would envision the love of my life. I dreamed of the one I would spend a lifetime with and imagined our family. Like many children, I would dream of the ways to bring happiness, joy, and love to everyone I touched and to the world. I imagined ways that would happen through my writing, film, and music. Now I find myself dreaming many of my childhood dreams as an adult. Now I've learned to believe in my dreams. All these many years later, these dreams are now becoming the manifestation of my life. I'm learning to make dreams come true through healing, happiness, joy, and love. The more I am this experience, the more I want to enjoy and spread the love to others. So that's the first two paragraphs of my book.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for reading that for us.
Oh, thank you. I don't see my presentation up anymore, so.
Do you have more that you wanted to go back to? It's just while we were having the.
If we're doing okay, yeah, let's go ahead and no, I think we're in a good spot right now. If we can, maybe I can share. I think we can set it up to where you can hear some music if you want to while we're talking. Maybe I could play a track or two if you'd like to hear that. Maybe my angel pieces I could share with you or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
We can certainly do this while we're talking. It's not like we have to stop talking.
I think people would probably love your angel pieces.
Yeah, I think I'll do the light one. I don't know if you want to hear the dark one. If you want to hear, one's called Broken Hearted Angel, appropriately titled. The other one is called Paradise Found. So I'm happy to play both of them if you want to hear them. Should I share screen again, Shaun?
Sure.
I want to say that your story about the convenience store clerk brought tears to my eyes.
Oh, well, thank you. You just never know sometimes. And I know in some of these conversations, in fact, with the group, with Shaun's group, we've talked about, those ripple effects that sometimes you just don't know that's the little most innocuous thing throughout the course of a day that you've done that you wouldn't necessarily think would make the difference. Maybe you even forgot about it moments after it happened, but all of a sudden you might have made such a difference in somebody's day. I don't know if this was the case with this particular girl, but who's to say you talk to somebody in a moment where they're in the middle of a big life decision and some innocuous thing you say to them, you think nothing of, means everything to them, where all of a sudden they go from not wanting to, being afraid of something to going, you know what, I can do this now because of what some stranger just said to me in the most unexpected of moments. I know I've had those moments before where I've just been some random place and had some random exchange with somebody and they say something that's like, oh my gosh, I really needed to hear that right now,
Yeah, and you did it out of love, so it's the love that ripples out. Yeah.
Thank you. why my presentation is not going down for me right here. Because let me try this a different way.
Before you play that, once you get that figured out, but before you play it, I have a private question that somebody has asked that they would like to ask anonymously. But once you figure that out, then I'll ask you. Well, we can answer a few questions first, and then we'll let everybody take a vote and see who wants to just listen to music. But you have a few more questions coming through, so let's make sure to answer those.
Just so for a little FYI, I'm not literally, the communication that I experience with beings like this is not necessarily a linguistic communication. There is a certain amount of that, mostly from my perspective, because it helps me to kind of guide my thought processes. But writing this piece of music with an angel, the second piece in particular, because the first she gave me something physical to work with. I could actually hear her actually humming the melodies on the first piece, which is how that started. In the case of this piece, it was more like a fusing of energies. There was no necessarily, hey, write this note, do this beat here. There's nothing like that. It was more just like hearing each other, but hearing each other on that soul level, that mind's eye level of just infusing our energies together. And as music comes out somehow through my human form, through my human brain, I'm able to interpret it in this way. And this is what comes out when I work on my digital audio workspace, which is called Ableton, my software that I use. This is a piece of music I would love to do with a symphony orchestra, with all the electronics, the beats, the bass lines, everything. And the crazy thing is I can envision it. I know how to do it. I would know exactly how to hook up the orchestra, the instruments. I can the technical part of it all. But again, I have the vision for all of it. I have a really good feeling about this one. It's an angel piece. It has to be, it does something good. I feel like good things are coming from this. I basically genre bend all over the place. Most of my music you can't really classify as a particular genre. Even my dance tracks don't really fit into any genres. And while a lot of electronic artists and a lot of electronic bands have worked with symphonies over the years, what I want to do has never been done before and has never been done like this.
Is there a place online we can hear your music?
It's not these tracks. I don't have these tracks out yet. None of this is released yet. The only stuff that I have online and is my stuff that you've seen, Shana, with my band Quantum Beings, and then of course you've hung out with the drum group. So that's the only stuff I've got online right now. But my band, it's called Quantum Beings of the Miraculous. It's definitely worth checking out. We've got some really cool stuff. What started this whole path for me. I would never be here if it wasn't for this band who let me join them for who knows what reason in the beginning. And it was very relevant, very serendipitous, and extremely unexpected the way it all happened. I would not be here right now if the universe literally had not just crafted this whole reality for me. Katie, who's not Katie Connolly, who's here, but Katie, who's the lead singer of my band, has commented to me a couple of times like, wow, Rex, the universe really wants you to be an artist. If there's one thing that has literally been super guided and blatantly obvious is this artist part of my life. Being a musician, composer, producer, this has been so incredibly guided. And even doing this, I didn't even know this was inside of me until a friend of mine decided to do classes for Ableton. And I just started working on Ableton, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all this music starts flooding into my head. And as I get better at using this piece of software, because I'm terrible at technology, I cannot stand sometimes working on technology because it's so frustrating. But Ableton, for some reason, was easy for me. And writing music on it has also been really easy for me. And I didn't even realize, in fact, Thanksgiving weekend of 2018, I literally, beginning of Thanksgiving weekend, like Thursday night, that night, I started just wanting to make a tone, started with a sound. I figured, okay, let me just see if I can make a simple little beat. And unexpectedly, I wasn't even planning on it. By Sunday night, I had all these instrument layers and I had everything all nice and organized. And I literally, Sunday night is like probably midnight, 11 o'clock midnight. I played this entire piece of music back. And I'm like, I just wrote a piece of music right now. So as I do all the time, I broke down and started crying my eyes out because I couldn't believe I just wrote a freaking piece of music and realized, wow, I'm going to start doing this. This is now becoming part of my life. I'm really going to compose music, which was one of my greatest childhood dreams that I never got close to manifesting. And so this, to me, being able to do this, and of course the next step is getting it out to the world. It's just been mind blowing, and I'm so grateful, and I'm so excited. If there's anything that really keeps me going in this life, is the fact that my brain can go here and do these wonderful things now that I didn't even realize. You can create something from absolutely nothing. Seems like there's nothing there, and I was in boom. Hours later, days later, you've got this beautiful creation that you can share with the world.
Rex, we have some more questions
Great.
to ask. So one is about how do you stay regulated with your TBI relative to your pre-NDE days? Because this person also has a TBI.
Oh, it's brutal. And if you have a TBI, there's some really, really bad days in there. Again, Katie and I have known each other for years, and she can attest that I have some really, really bad days. Some days, and it varies. I mean, the worst days are the monster migraines that I get. I'm gonna start another song here. And then of course there's this other, like, I guess lesser kind of variations of it, where I just have days where I just feel like I've got this like massive hangover going on. I don't drink. I'm not a drinker at all. And there are just times where I if you've ever had a really bad hangover, I have a lot of my days where this is how I feel. I don't necessarily have the full on migraine. I just have, this days where I have no energy. My brain won't work. It's so much so I won't even get out in my car and go drive anywhere. That's how out of it I can get sometimes. So managing it's a challenge. What I do, I have a number of things that I have in place. Not the least of which, and a lot of it might seem counterintuitive to some people, because it's not always maybe the most healthy of things for some people, because I use caffeine, and I admit I sometimes use marijuana. But I use it very carefully. I used to be a recreational user for marijuana, but I don't anymore because marijuana doesn't affect me the same way. However, I've noticed if I'm very careful and very meticulous, I can use it medicinally, and I can use it to help my brain, sometimes to stimulate it when it's not working. Caffeine's the same way. I got to be careful with caffeine, because if I use too much, it will give me a headache. But there's a certain amount of caffeine that makes my brain work. Believe it or not, it also helps my headaches. So it's kind of a day-to-day thing, because it seems like no 2 days are really exactly the same. I would hate to have to be a neurologist and deal with patients that have traumatic brain injury, because they're so frustrating. And what seems to work one day doesn't seem necessarily want to work the next day. The biggest single thing for me and my TBI is sleeping. Besides the migraines, those which are brutal sometimes, I don't sleep very well most of the time. Oftentimes my migraines are tied, and how I feel are tied to the way I'm sleeping. So the center of everything for me is trying to find ways to let myself sleep. Because if I can't sleep, then my quality of life is going to be compromised between the headaches, the hangover thing that I get, and just a complete lack of energy that just can happen on a day-to-day basis. So I will say it's not easy. And if you hear me talking, no, I have some really tough times with this. This is not an easy thing to navigate. So I empathize with you. And I imagine you probably have days like this too. And you probably go through these same kinds of ups and downs, because you're dealing with the brain. And I know Dr. Perlman, my neurologist, is like, this is the one area of medicine for all of our advancements we really just don't know much about. And he's been the first to say that every TBI situation is different. It's all unique. I don't know if what I'm saying is helping, but the two biggest things is eat well, drink a lot of water, get your exercise, and sleep. Get your sleep, get a nice regular sleep schedule going. Those things alone should hopefully help you a lot. As far as caffeine or using marijuana or anything else, I think it's kind of unique to each one of us. I think what works for me, and it may not work for every other TBI person, but I would just say experiment with some different things, and maybe think a little bit outside the box with some things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise explore, because maybe you just didn't believe in it or think about it, because that might be the thing that helps you, because the brain is just something, for all of us, can be really that unpredictable. But I will say, though, if you manage it, and for me, what helps me is that I don't have to work a regular job. If I did, I would never last. So what helps me be productive and helps me have a quality of life is that when I have the moments when I do feel good, and I do thankfully have those good days. Lately, I've been having more than not, which is awesome. A lot of it is me feeling better too. And again, it's the mindset that makes a really big difference. Being stressed out, being upset, hurt, all that stuff is very much drives things like our migraines, and also drives, I think, some of those post-traumatic symptoms of a traumatic brain injury. But yeah, letting yourself be happy, seizing those moments when you do feel good, and remembering how that feels when you don't feel good, so you know where you want to be and how you can get back to it. And when you have those moments, you know what? Go bust your butt on whatever you love doing. Just go out there and just go crazy with it.
I have another question, a very personal one. The person asks if you have reconnected with your mom since your NDE, and also what happened to the fallen angel that you met.
My mom is very much a part of my experience now. I feel her. I think you heard me sobbing a little bit earlier in the presentation over the idea that my mom is with me. I feel her, and I'm incredibly grateful to that. And I communicate with her every day. But at the same time, because I'm still a physical being in this corporeal reality, I still miss her, the person that she was in this life, and what she was to me in this life. That person, there's still a big gaping hole there. I mean, that's just, again, that kind of a soul in your life is just, it's, I don't know. I don't want to say irreplaceable because nobody's truly irreplaceable. But she is very much a part of my life now. But she's in a different form, because while I remember her, the energy, she's still the energy and the being that was my mom in this life. She's a soul being now. And even though when she comes to me, I still envision my mom, because when that energy touches me, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is the picture of my mom and the feel of her and the sound of her voice and everything. But yet I understand in this form, she is now a soul being again. So in a way, she's kind of not my mom, but yet the souls were still intimately connected. And she's still very much a part of my experience. It's just different now.
And the other part of that question was about the fallen angel that you encountered.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes. She is also very much a part of my life. We very much have a relationship, a friendship. And, like any friends, anytime we need each other, a little kick in the metaphorical butt, if you will, we're there for each other. There's a genuine friendship here. And I love her. She loves me. I mean, she's an angel. She just loves me. That's what we do. But there is, I guess, in terms of that connection, our relationship, there's a love between us at this point. And there is a real bonded friendship, if you will. I mean, like you would with any person here on earth. She's my friend, one of my best friends.
Okay. Are there any other questions in the chat? Anything I've missed? Anyone want to raise their hand?
Also, anybody who wants to share their links in the room, Kelly, if you wanted to share your chat or your links. Michael, if you want to share yours, go ahead and put those in now. And then I just want to remind everyone, please download his book. Reviews are so important to sell books. And that's the biggest way that you can show your appreciation to Rex is to download his book and to write him a beautiful review on Amazon. That will really help him the most. That's the best way that we can all show our gratitude for him.
And I know we have a question, and maybe we have to ask the question, then I've got a parting thought, if you will, something I want to say before we go.
Rex, I had a question for you. Another thing that came up, when you're talking about all your symptoms and everything, is that I can relate to a lot of those. And I just remembered that when I was 5 years old, I fell like 25, 30 feet out of a tree and was knocked unconscious and had stitches in the back of my head and everything else like that. And I didn't relate it to a TBI, but now when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, man, maybe those are some of the reasons why I have similar symptoms to what you have. It was an interesting thought, but that wasn't my question. But did you have regression therapy at all, or have you linked any of these dreams maybe to past lives like little kids do, because of maybe your injury that you kick back into other lives that you weren't aware of before?
Just a moment here. Yes, I did actually. One of the craziest things that's happened since, and it's really something that's been mostly over the past like 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. Sorry, all this crying is making my nose runny. I'm sorry, what did you say? Say the question one more time, forgive me.
Well, like Like if you've had regression
Yeah, the
therapy.
regressions. Oh, yes. Sorry, forgive me. Sometimes my brain just kind of lapses once in a while. Thank you.
And
The thought came
and
back.
Well,
But
and then
yes,
if that
it's
was
not really a
linked,
regression that I've had. What's happened is I've literally endured this life review kind of a thing. Only my life review has been for my entire soul journey. And it also explained to me why I had the kind of NDE that I had, because that's when my soul came into the inception of the experience. Yes, in terms of that, I now see all my lives, all my experiences. It's all there. I can't sit there necessarily go through the process of my human brain trying to remember in order what it all was, so to speak, or some kind of sense of chronology. But that whole realm of my being has been just woken right up. There's a big giant light on that now. And I see where I've been, I see where I come from, and now I also see where I'm going. And for the first time in my soul journey, most souls between lives journey home between lives, go to heaven, if you will, whatever term you want to use for that. My soul has gone down some very dark roads in its journey, and I'm finally going home for the first time, possibly for the final time. However, having said that, one thing about the light going into the experience, when it finally all comes home, it's all going to come home together. We're not necessarily doing this all by ourselves as separate. We have our separate experiences, and they have these individual experiences of the soul journey, including trips home, if you will. But ultimately, we're all going to go home together when that time comes, when the karma has truly run its course, the big arching big picture of karma has run its course, from the original dark and light splitting of the experience. We all will make that journey home. But getting back to my own soul journey, these past lives, that whole thing has literally just been just woken right up. So not only am I seeing past, but I'm also seeing future. I'm kind of looking at it like the field, like the Akasha, where it's all things kind of experience it all at once until I kind of sort of zero in and try to look at one aspect of it. In this case, talking about, referring to my soul journey. So yes, I can talk about many different lives throughout many different ages, but not just here on Earth. Also forms of experience and existence that are not even remotely human, that at some point, most of us as souls have experienced. A lot of our souls have not just been human beings. Many of our souls, depending on the kind of journey and the kind of soul, when emerging into the experience, may have had experiences that can go all the way back to the inception of the experience itself, to the original dark light duality, if you will. But yeah, that's my big long-winded way of saying, yes, if you want to talk past lives, that's a good couple of hours unto itself easily.
Yeah.
And I do have a presentation for that.
Say, Rex, I have a couple more questions.
Cool.
One is, how did you get housed after homelessness? This is coming from someone who has a personal concern about this.
Oh, back when when my mom died and stuff. I got my brother, one of my friends, kind of threw some money my way. It wasn't a lot or anything, but they gave me just enough money to go get a little one-room apartment. And I was able to, with that, go get a job. Shortly after that, some serendipitously, I was able to start DJing. I had been DJing for a while, got into a club there, got a regular gig, and got a couple jobs going. And at that point in time, I cleaned up off all the drugs I was doing. The only thing I was doing at that point was just smoking marijuana, which is a whole lot less than all the speed I was doing. Again, I was never been a drinker, even though I worked clubs my whole life. Even back then, I just never liked alcohol. But at that point, I cleaned up and got off all the drugs, all the coke, the meth that I was doing. Trying to realize I completely screwed myself over. My future was set. I had everything set. I was doing great before my mom died. And so I had, of course, then I was dealing with a lot of those guilt feelings of realizing I just destroyed my entire life and destroyed myself, and thinking about how ashamed my mom would be of me and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that period of my life, that was brutal. If I didn't have literally a couple of people reach out with the help, so a couple of helping hands at that moment, who's to say where I would have ended up, honestly, because if my brother hadn't decided to, because my brother didn't know the extent of how bad it was. He just knew that something was wrong, and he was just getting really worried about me. And another one of my friends who I knew for years was also having that same feeling, and they apparently had a conversation and decided, you know what, we're going to go do a little intervention and get Rex up off the streets, and get him into a place and see if we can't get him working and get his shit back together. Sorry, get his stuff back together, because I was a mess. I was a complete mess, and I was, yeah, just a mess.
Okay, thanks, Rex. Another question, Carmine, do you want to ask it yourself? You're muted.
Unmute. Okay, I'm unmuted. Okay. Rex was in the previous question. Maybe I didn't understand Rex's answer. Rex, do you feel that there's a final ending point? Is there a karmic ending of something? Or are we eternal?
Yes and yes. I'll elaborate. Yes, I believe this karmic cycle will run its course.
And what
But-
does that mean?
Well, in the simple terms, when all that which is left the light, all these soul beings having all these soul journeys find their way back home again. And in the most simple of contexts, again, if I may use a biblical analogy, it'll be when the first, I feel like, and I think Lucifer, the idea of the devil, represents the first dark duality, the God and the devil, the first sense of dark and light. Lucifer was the first one cast to the dark. Lucifer will likely be the last being to make its way back home to the light. And Lucifer, I thought about this recently, actually means light bringer. And I never understood that before, because Lucifer is the devil. How is Lucifer? How does that ever, even if Lucifer was God's right hand, whatever, at some point, how does Lucifer translate into light bringer? Now I think I understand. If Lucifer is the light bringer, it's because Lucifer is going to be the last being to find its way back home. And after that, there will be no more dark, only light, which is why Lucifer is the light bringer. Just a theory. But my feeling on that is, and it's kind of very esoteric and very nebulous, but simply put, this karmic cycle will find its way back home, then a whole brand new one's likely to start up again. And there's more than likely, because we're talking about multiple realities and parallel universes, there's probably lots of karmic cycles going on all the time. And we're just part of one massive karmic cycle right now.
I understand that. I was the one that commented on journeys.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a matter of interpretation, but I don't think you're saying one karmic cycle runs into the other. And
sure, it's so complex and intricately interwoven like that. Sure,
I understand that. What I'm saying is that I'm not so sure it's one run into the other as much as it seems to me it just never ends. There's karmic cycle. One karma thing brings another.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's lots of beginnings and endings, but at the same time, it's a cycle that goes on forever. It is eternal. It's a process.
We have beginnings and endings.
Lots of beginnings and endings, but the overall process is never ending.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. This one's called Ingratia Cantantes. And I was kind of planning on playing this because it's basically Latin for ingratitude. My thanks for this life. My thanks to all of you. And just thank you for being, and for the first time feeling a sense of gratefulness and gratitude throughout our course of a lifetime. And that's not to suggest that, and we all have it. And I know, especially if you've got the sensitivities similarly to me, then it's a really challenging existence out there. If anything, the NDEs actually made it harder, not easier. But there's no way I could imagine it being any other way. And I know in my heart of hearts, where I want to be, how I want to feel, and no matter where I go, the deviations that can come, the challenges that come, I just stay focused on that. And one of the things I want to say is we're getting ready. I think, again, I'm happy to stay as long as you want, but something to think about. And one of the things that helped me to shift from my past, I mentioned violence in my past and drug addiction and things like that, having done some really horrible things. And for the longest time, part of the problem was, how do I turn that into something positive? And I'll say, I want to dive into all the details on that. But one thing about writing this book, and I might recommend to everyone, whether it's writing a journal, you don't have to write a book and put it out to the world. I'm putting my business, my personal information, my life to the world. I don't think everybody necessarily is comfortable doing that. And that's fine. My point is this. In writing my life story, so many things came out that I did not expect. Well, among them is this. I had don't get me wrong, my mom was beautiful, but my parents were divorced. I was bullied as a child. I had a lot of abuses growing up. Despite my mother, my beautiful, beautiful mother, I had so many abuses growing up. I'm from Detroit. I fought from a very early age. It was, and so I kind of had this idea that, oh, what a crappy childhood. So when I first writing my book, and I'm writing about my past, I'm writing all these negative things about all these horrible things that happened in my past. But along the way, I'm starting to remember, wait a second, I knew this really great person during that time, and they did this in my life. And then I started to go a little further. Oh, there's other set of people, these other set of experiences that I didn't even stop to think about. Now, that doesn't preclude or change the fact that I've had these abuses. That happened. That's real. But I also came to realize there's so much more to this, because all that hurt was just so dominant in my mind and in my psyche, I lost sight of the good stuff. And what that helped me to do is remind myself of how wonderful my childhood really was amidst all the negativity that took place. And also what I learned, especially with my violent past, is there are ways that those experiences can be turned to a positive. One example of that, I talk about this in the book. I tell the story in the book. I was at a coffee shop one time, few years back, and this is, I was still going through my surgery, so my body's still very frail at this point. And I'm in this coffee shop, hanging out with a group of friends, and we would meet up and have conversations, not like what we're doing right here. It's kind of a personal meetup, but it was about 6 of us. Get into these deep conversations. It all started because of the NDE. These are all friends of mine that knew me coming back to the other side of the NDE, so it was really cool. And there's this couple of gentlemen sitting at a table next to us. And this one guy, and I could tell, and again, I'm from Detroit, I'm from tattoo culture, got lots of tats on me and things like that. And so I kind of knew this guy based on his tattoos, based on his demeanor. He was very, very street. And I figured he probably has been to prison because some of his tats look like prison tats. But he looks at me and he's like, oh man, he was just so pissed. He's like, oh man, you are soft. I can't even believe you're saying, you live in the world. How could you say that, man? And then you're going into, white boy this, and how could you say that? The streets would just chew you up and spit you out. He was just laughing. He and his buddy are just both laughing, shaking their heads at me. And like I said, I'm still in a very frail space. And despite martial arts or anything else, I wasn't trying to start a fight, number one, but number two, this guy straight pissed me off. So I take my glasses off. I wasn't trying to start something because I knew where he came from, and I knew the kind of where he, I know about street because I come from the streets. And so I basically just look him in the eye, and I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but at the same time, I'm gonna be like, look this boy in the eye and be like, okay, man, it's like this. First of all, I told him a little bit about my past, where I've been, what I've done. Then I got into the near-death experience, the falling, the surgeries, all the therapies, and all the pain, and how much I came back from. And I got right up into his face as I'm saying this to him, and I looked at him in the eye, like, dude, so listen, you went through all that. How strong do you think you would be? How would you handle all that? How strong are you really? Just like that to this guy. And I thought, oh crap, I'm in a fight now. This is gonna be on now, and I'm gonna lose because I'm still pretty busted up, but it's still I just that's my warrior mentality. He's like, I'm gonna do this. But check this out. He looks at me real funny for a second, kind of shakes his head, gets a smile on his face. He's like, do you mind if I get in on this conversation? Can I join you guys? I'm like, are you serious? Of course you can join me. Are you serious? What was that all about? Get over here. You both get over here. Let's do this. And I'll be darned if that guy wasn't a big part of the conversation moving forward. This is a guy, this is one of those you just don't know where true wisdom lies and how it's going to come out. So what that told me was like, listen, I would not have been able to make a connection like this with this guy and his friend if it wasn't for that background where I did such horrible things, such violent things, to let him know, hey, I've been there too. And if I can do this, you can do this too. No matter where you are, what you're at, if there's something else you want in this life, you can freaking do it. And so he did. He and his buddy joined us. And we talked for another couple of hours, and he was a big part of the conversation. And he had a lot to say. And before that, you would have had no idea that this was inside of this guy, especially by his appearance, his looks, his tattoos, and everything. You would have had no idea he was thinking these kinds of thoughts. So because of my experiences that I thought were so horrible, I walked away going, wow, all of a sudden I have meaning to those horrible, horrible memories. Now they have actual positive meaning. Because now I know, because of that, I can relate to certain people that maybe other NDEers can't relate to. And maybe because of that, they'll listen to me, at least give it a chance where they may not otherwise. So that's powerful. So all of a sudden, my negative past is shifting now into something lighter, something that's healing and positive. Whereas before, it just held me down, and I hated myself for it. And I hated to share about that. It just was, embarrassing. But yes, this is one of the many ways we can shift that past, shift our dark into light. Take that which has been negative in our lives, because sometimes we're looking at things through the lens of a child from the last time we thought about it, the last emotional impression that came from such an experience. And sometimes doing something like journaling or going through and talking about and writing about and working on your life story can change that perspective, because now you're looking at it as not only as an adult, but as an adult who's a spiritual being, who's thinking healing, loving spiritual thoughts and taking this loving approach to even all these memories. So it's like showing yourself the same kind of compassion you would show to somebody else if they were telling you these stories about their past. Bring that compassion into yourself and into your past and all of that which has been dark inside of you, that are thorns in your internal sides, that hold you back, that are walls and barriers to your best self. All of a sudden they just come crashing down.
All right. So, Shaun, I think we've kind of gone over your limit for your group meetings, but I can stay on longer with Rex.
Yeah, what we'll do, that was a wonderful final thought, Rex. Yeah, we can keep going, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stop recording live to Facebook, and everyone can share more freely too, since we're not on Facebook. But I just wanted to end the recording and thank you so much, Rex, for this wonderful presentation. And to let people know, because I know that a lot of people are hanging on and they're like, they're wanting permission to sit back or go to sleep or whatever they want to do. So whoever wants to stay, you're welcome to stay and keep discussing freely. But I also want to thank everybody for coming and thank Katie. This has been really fun. And also to invite you all January 4th, we have Yvonne Kaysen. She was a past IANDS president, and she now leads Spiritual Awakenings International. She coined the term in 1994, Spiritually Transformative Experience. And she's written several really helpful books for many people. So she'll be speaking on January 4th to Hawaiian IANDS, and she will be explaining all of the different, types of spiritually transformative experiences, plus sharing her own. And then Katie's meetup in January 26th.
That's
What do you have going on?
And we have Suzanne Price, who will talk about after-death communications. She was an IANDS conference speaker, and she's local to Colorado, and she's very, very good and interesting. So hope to see some of you there.
Thank you, Shaun. As my last piece of music says, in gratia cantantes, in gratitude, my friend. Nothing but love, and really, thank you. Just thank you. Appreciate this opportunity, and I love you, Katie, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you so
I'll go
much
ahead and
for
I'm going to
sharing.
stop the recording, but you guys can keep going.
I'm heading to.
Hey, great to see you, Pamela. Thank you too.
You now have permission to go pass out.
Sleep well. Beautiful dreams.
Thank you.